Thank you to Janelle. My name is Jeff Gobeil. I born, raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba. My father was a Métis man with ties to South Junction, Manitoba. That's where he grew up on old farmland down there. And my mom was a very proud Anishinaabe woman from Poplar River First Nation. I try to visit as often as I can, but that seems to only be once every couple of years. Um, yeah, my two my parents were very much my rocks in my life, in my early life. Um, I grew up raised by a single father, but we saw our mom on the weekends and stuff like that. And then once I was an adult, I just drove to visit her. I also I grew up in a very, very big family, very blended. I had seven sisters. One unfortunately passed away recently. I was raised in a house full time with two of my sisters. Later on, three more joined through family circumstances. My entire life, I went to private Catholic school. That's elementary and high school. It was one of those like bursary programs where like 5% of the student population need to be Indigenous. And then there's me like, hello, I'm here. Um, we had that. My parents also, I joke that I'm the oldest orphan that you can be, but I'm actually technically not an orphan. In order to be an orphan, your caregivers have to both pass away before you turn a certain age. And my father was the last to pass, and he passed right after my 25th birthday. So I'm actually the only one of my siblings who's not an orphan, which is a bit of a ripoff because once upon a time there was orphan benefits that I didn't qualify for. But yes, both my parents passed away to cancer. My mom lung cancer, my father lymphoma. Um, what changed my life though, around the time my mother's cancer came back, she dropped off my half siblings, my three youngest half siblings, on my father's doorstep and had asked him if he could raise them. And I only identify them as half siblings for the sake of explaining the relationship. I never call them that beyond that. My father said yes. CFS got involved, did it everything properly. My father became like their guardian legally. And I was kind of doing respite work with my own siblings. It was interesting. I didn't realize that thanks to CFS, pre-Pallister, that I was able to get paid to hang out with my siblings. So we were going to movies and stuff like that, and we became very tight, very close. Um, Unfortunately, after my mother passed, my father also got diagnosed with cancer. And that was kind of a huge moment in my life because it drastically changed kind of everything about me. Looking down the road while my father was still alive, but knowing that his cancer was terminal and kind of reflecting on myself, I realized that as a construction worker and alcoholic and all around jerk, that I needed to kind of turn this ship around of my life and who I am as a person for fear of essentially being a bad parent to my siblings. So after my father passed, I ended up reading my way, excuse me, got the burps. But after my father passed, I ended up reading my way through this feminist book, trying to just find any advice for being the parent of three girls. I should say two, sorry, two girls, one sibling. Um, and it was very difficult for me. I would later go on to refer to myself as a reformed asshole because I was very much um, not the best version of myself, for lack of a better way of explaining it. But while all this was going on, I was actually in an abusive relationship that at the time I had no idea was abusive. I spent 10 years with this partner of mine. So after my father passed, and my siblings came into my care, me actually and my sister who's in the chat there, me and my sister became like their sole guardians kind of thing. CFS asking that we just raise them and get them over the finish line of adulthood and make sure they get into school and on their way to living that good life. Um, me and my abusive partner broke up. And it completely rocked my world when I realized that it was abusive because I didn't know until like 6 months after the breakup. So here I am trying to help out with raising my sisters and working in conjunction with family members and CFS. And um, the only thing I had going in my life is at that point, I was a recent graduate of Red River College. Um, and I became a journeyman carpenter. So while all this is going on, I ended up actually breaking my back after the pandemic announcements. Like literally the radio went on like global pandemic emergency announcement, Manitoba state of emergency. I can't remember exactly what the radio thing said, but it was like, please shelter in place and like don't move around and more announcements to come. Please watch the news, listen to the radio, yada yada. And after I cleaned up a job site, because of that announcement, because I was working construction, I actually broke my back. So it was a super strange time to be reflecting on an abusive relationship, to having been recently graduated, to be really deep in my alcoholism. And I felt a little out of place because I had actually moved in with this other girl, and I had broke my back. Like, what do you do? My S1 L5, whatever that disc is, that was bulging, and it was a clean sever on my tailbone. Um, I couldn't work construction. I couldn't move around, and I started having panic attacks. And all this was too much. And I had a history of going to anger management. So I was like, maybe therapy can help me with panic attacks. I have no idea. So I ended up seeking out a therapist. And that was kind of the second big change in my life because I started looking back not only on my abusive relationship, but of my abusive childhood. So much had gone on with like school teachers and uncles and family members who were supposed to be in a position to protect me and my family when we were just young kids, that a lot of these safeguards fell through, and almost wall to wall, my entire childhood is just a series of abuse. Until one day my therapist had told me um, there is no statute of limitations on child sexual abuse. And once I found out what that was and what that meant, I immediately went to the police. I think that same week. In 2021, I came forward with a story of child sexual abuse by my half sibling's father. And I told some family members my intentions. And then my sister, who was recently graduated as a lawyer at the time, had told me, don't give us any details because if we also come forward, it could screw up our court case. So you can't tell anything or anyone if you really want to go down this path. And I was like, yes, I want to go down this path. So while extremely helpful and in the long run a perfect strategy, it was also kind of isolating because here I am trying to relate to people, trying to tell my story, and it's like, hey, you got to shut up until court's over. So it was a very strange time in my life. But also recovering from the broken tailbone and the damaged disc and the ribs and whatnot. I realized I don't think I have the physical strength to work construction anymore. So I had actually looked at my therapist who had helped me, and I had told her, I was like, you do a lot of work to make me feel seen, and a lot of therapy is just you sitting and listening to me complain, and I'm grateful for it. But my one complaint was like, I pay you like $135 every single session. How can I get your job? Because I want to start making that kind of money. And my therapist was telling me, she's like, I'm just a social worker. I'm just a social worker who got additional training after I graduated. And I was like, wow, I thought social workers were only CFS people. And she was like, nope, nope, social work covers like a huge range of work. And then when she said respite work is a part of social work, I was like, I was already doing respite work. What the heck? Um, Trying to check my notes here. Yeah, so I was telling her I was already doing respite work. I'm kind of like the ideal candidate to become a social worker. So instead of going to school to become a counselor, I ended up putting what at the time felt like a long shot application to the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Manitoba, and I got accepted. Um, I kind of couldn't believe it. I was completely blown away. But because I also couldn't work construction, I started volunteering at the same time just to do something with my life. I ended up working at a place called the Mood Disorders Association of Manitoba. I ended up being their Indigenous programs facilitator, would later go on to become part of the men's facilitation group as well as part of the interim youth facilitator. Ended up doing all this work. School started, but same thing. It was still during the pandemic. A lot of stuff was over Zoom, just like this. So I am very versed in sitting and talking on Zoom. to a webcam, knowing people are listening while also essentially just being in this weird office talking out loud to no one. Um, but yeah, no, like I said, it had changed my life. I would go on to leave mood disorders thanks to my practicums that I had to do with my work in social work. And because I had come forward about my abuse, because I was in therapy, actively working through not only the abusive relationship I was in, but sexual abuse I faced as a child, working through my childhood betrayals and just everything else that goes into therapy. Um, and there was a weird day where I decided I'm gonna do dry January after Christmas, and I couldn't do it. I got to like day 12 and I went on like a crazy, crazy bender, like 3 days straight of drinking. When I realized I also maybe I have a drinking problem too, just to put a cherry on top of my life. I I ended up going to Alcoholics Anonymous. I called one of my father's family friends, Alcoholic Anonymous friends, I mean. And he took me under his wing. He was like, "I'll take you to the rooms. I'll show you how to do it all, but you know, you gotta open the door. This isn't an easy path to walk. You might want to see a doctor to get some meds." Um, I kind of wish he further explained that. So to anyone who ever wants to quit drinking, definitely see a doctor. Because I didn't know the shakes that I was having were borderline convulsions. Um, but all this to say, around this time is when I started expressing myself creatively through comedy. I have a past of writing poems. I picked up a guitar at 15 and never put it down. I wrote my own music. I have performed with a few bands. But what was interesting is I also did rap music. I have written 4 full-length rap albums, one that's good. And I've always had this as this creative outlet, but because of that abusive ex-partner, she actually made me sell all my guitars, all my gear, asked me to stop rapping because every rap song was about how much I hate her. Which is kind of funny, I guess. So I had actually hung up all creativeness that I have ever had. Like it's no wonder I started having panic attacks because there's just no outlet for me outside of drinking. Um, and so anyways, around the time I was graduating school, um, all the court dates were set. Um, like I said, I had stopped drinking, and exactly when I stopped drinking, I picked up stand-up comedy. That was life-changing. To give up this huge part of my life, like I very much identified myself, like I was inseparable from my identity involving alcohol. So to not only quit drinking, but to dive headfirst into this world of stand-up comedy, I realized I have zero social skills to get drunk and to compliment people and to weave myself in and out of these groups and these rooms was nothing to me. I could have done it um, as long as I kept drinking, but once I stopped, like I said, I had no social skills. So to relearn social skills in the setting of Winnipeg stand-up comedy scene, it only made me annoying. That's a joke. No, it made me a little annoying because now it was like a return to my childhood. Me and my sisters and all my other siblings and our cousins and kind of Native people in general, all kind of filter experiences, good or bad, through a lens of comedy. It's like you can't explain something without making it funny. You can't be like, I got into a car crash. You have to be like, it just gets into a crash, and like try to make the room laugh. You know what I mean? To be like, oh, I got third-degree whiplash and now I got bone spurs poking in the back of my throat. You just can't swallow. Like it's been my entire life. So stand-up felt like such a natural place to bring things. Um, so me and one of my siblings went through court. My sister Raven, I just realized I can say her name because court's over. Me and my sister Raven went through the court process. We got crossed. We did it all. And our abuser was found guilty on, I think, like 15 or 17 different charges. He was sentenced to 25 years, which is a life sentence. And this was very recent. Um, However, the day that the guilty verdict was given, 15, oh, it was 15, because 17 charges, 15 guilty. He was found guilty on 15 charges, and ended up writing his Facebook status about the whole process. Right before I explain the Facebook status, though, I will say, during this time, I started dating this girl, Alyssa Bird, and she would later go on to accept my hand in marriage. And we're a little different, I'll say that. We don't like the conventional date nights of like steak and potato at some restaurant, candle lit, and pretending like we like each other's company. Me and Alyssa love each other, like two people are supposed to. In place of dates, we do lessons. Like we've done improv lessons together where Alyssa shines. We've done acting lessons together where I shine. And we continue actually to do singing lessons together. And out of all these lessons, in conjunction with watching Fringe Fest last year, specifically shouting out Bob Banks as well as Kristen Einerson. Um, I was looking at the whole thing with my basic experience in with acting lessons. Like I could not only write this, I could act this. Um, and I can perform it, duh. And I can perform it. Um After I quit drinking, about a year after I quit drinking, I was diagnosed formally through, I think, Too Good Consulting is what it's called, with AD. Um, I realized my brain wasn't working the way other people describe their brains of working. I remember very specifically in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, I said, sometimes I like drinking just to stop the voices. And someone was like, that sounds schizo. And I was like, I'm not schizophrenic. Take it down a notch. Um, but what I meant was like the constant influx of information where things are pulling my brain each and every direction. And I realized part of my drinking was trying to cope or manage with this ADD that went undiagnosed my whole life. My dad was very like anti chiropractors and therapists and anything of the sort was all racket, just nonsense for these so-called doctors to get your money. Which is funny because now actually I see a chiropractor like at least once a month ever since the accident. And I'm becoming a therapist. And and I have ADD. Yeah, it's a reality. Once I learned coping skills, schedules, making to-do lists, having notes when I do speakers. Oh, you can't see it, but there's another monitor like right here. Um, yeah, it has completely helped and changed everything for me. It made me better in school. My two final years in university, after I quit drinking and with the ADD stuff, I actually ended up on the dean's list every single semester because I just learned how my brain works and what works best for me. I'm very good at learning in the morning and late at night. During the day, it's not happening. I can't pick up a book midday. I just know I can't. It drives my brain nuts. But if you give me a meeting in a professional setting, kind of like this in the afternoon, I'm your guy. But anyways, all that to set the stage for my performance tomorrow. On the day that my abuser received the guilty verdict, I wrote a Facebook status, and the status was way more poetic than I ever meant it to be. My wife was out of town. I was at home and couldn't sleep and was just processing the whole thing. And I felt myself start to kind of go the way of having a panic attack. And I was like, what did I used to do back then? I would smudge, I would meditate, and I was like, I would journal. So instead of journaling, like I said, I wrote a Facebook status. Um, One of my stepbrothers, my younger siblings, father, had reached out and he was very moved by my status. I wrote about the court process. I wrote some of the stuff that's on my mind. Um, Not only afterwards, but like during the guilty verdict. There's a very important part during my cross-examination where my abuser stared at me, realizing I was kind of messing up during cross. and it looked like he was satisfied with me struggling, and it made the abuse far too real. It made cross very difficult, and to see my abuser looking at me in court and smiling, just it was devastating. So then, when the guilty verdict was being read, I was staring right at my abuser. I'm like, "Come on, look at me again, look at me again. Come on, you punk bitch." But he didn't. So I included that in this Facebook status, and my brother Matthew, my stepbrother Matthew, there, he locked onto that moment. He's like, "Yeah, this is like a moment of you taking your power back." And I was like, "Oh, very much so." And then I can't remember how the conversation turned to Fringe Fest, but I think by this point I was already locked in for the Kianan Festival. I was just gonna do stand up. Um, and he's like, "Dude, what if this became a Fringe play, you know?" And and yeah, the original title was Victim's Impact Statement. So during court, there's a sentencing hearing where the victims, myself, my sister, are allowed to read victims' impact statements. I had written some 17 pages of very specific instances where the abuse had interfered with my life, with my schooling, my self-worth, my identity, my relationship with my siblings, my relationship with my father, trusting adults. Like I had written this huge thing. And then when it came time for court, I didn't want him to hear any of that. I didn't want my abuser to be privy to that at all. And this is my life. This is life after him, after he got arrested when I was 7 or 8 years old. So instead, I condensed it as much as possible, and I wrote a very emotional, very short victim's impact statement, essentially just being like, "Hey, fuck this guy for everything he did." Apologies for swearing. And I kept the original 18-page draft, and that became draft one of my play for the Fringe Fest. And I kept the title Victims Impact Statement. So Mr. Matthew, as well as some other good friends and the good people over at the Kianan Festival, Philip specifically, I believe, everyone wanted to hook me up with this guy named Corey Wojciech, which is nice because it turns out he had already heard of me. So when I sent him my first draft, he's like, I don't want to read this. I'd rather see it performed, especially if it's a one-man play. Is there any way where we can rent a space and just have you either read the entire play or like your vision for acting it out? And I did. Draft one was way too heavy. He's like, you're gonna destroy people who hear this, and not in a good way. We're gonna have to cut a lot of this. But what was so cool in draft one of the play, there was a spot that I called a sequence, and I'm not calling them acts or whatever they call within acts. I've just been calling them sequences, or like act one, part one, whatever. I'm calling them like sequence one. And I had this sequence that I titled "Ol' Stand Up Gobeil," just for a little levity right in the middle of this like heavy play involving court drama, involving monologues explaining how early I was exposed to stand up, my relationship with my parents, stuff like that, misunderstandings in my private Catholic upbringing as someone who never truly felt like I fit in with the Catholic scene, especially like post 9/11. And suddenly there's this 5-minute stand-up piece right in the middle of the play, and Corey was like, "That was absolutely hilarious. The play should be half that." And I was like, "There's no way I could do half this." So I sat with that note for about a week, and I was like, "You know what? I think the play is half stand-up. I think you're absolutely right." So in preparation for the Canon Fest, we did a draft two. Um, where I caught a lot of the fat. Some of it, I think, during the writing process when you're creating something is just to get it all out there. And then you have to kill your darlings, everything that you love, you're gonna have to get rid of. And some of them are tough and some of them were tough. But to have this through piece where I'm not only talking about court, my abuser, and I'm naming names and dates, and now we're gonna come over here and laugh for about 10 minutes, to joke about tragedy. is one of my favorite things. They say comedy is tragedy over time, but I say my comedy is tragedy plus more tragedy, more recent tragedy. Time has passed. It's just there's been more tragedy. Um, and that, yeah, then we were off to the races. I performed that draft under the original title, Victims Impact Statement, at the Cannes Festival. And thanks to my preparation for that festival, a gentleman by the name of Adam Schwartz reached out and told us about the accessibility and arts program and the performance that we're having tomorrow. He's like, if you put in, you're a day past submission, but you're a shoo-in. And yeah, he liked it, and these good people have me here now. So the play itself, Corey had asked me to retitle it. He said, "Victim's Impact Statement is what it is, but is it the title?" And man, he rode me on that one. He'll lie and say he didn't, but Corey rode me on that one, man. He's like, but for the Fringe Fest where you have, 50, 60 different performances, people need to know what your show is by the title. Like they have to judge a book by its cover. How can you portray within a title that this is going to be funny, but it's also going to be heavy? And I'm also in my time as the older sibling respite worker with my younger siblings. All my younger siblings are huge anime nerds. And it kind of rebirthed my love for anime, but as an adult, and I never let go of that. To this day, I was actually just watching anime at my desk like this morning. I'm just about finished Your Lie in April for like the 10th time. Um, but anyways, there's this trend in anime right now where they have these ridiculous, ridiculous titles of like that time I got reincarnated as a slime. Um, I accidentally maxed out my defense stat to 100. Me isekai'd as a baby. These dumb, dumb titles. So I wrote one of those titles in place of Victim's Impact Statement. I wrote the Crown Witness is also a stand-up comedian? Question mark. And I fell in love with the title. I sent it to Corey. He was like, "That's a little long." I'm like, "It's the title." I know. When you find something as an artist and that's it? I'm like, "This is it, man. This is the title." The Crown Witness is also a stand-up comedian. One interesting moment during cross actually. I can't remember exactly how it came to be, but I had ripped a joke that went over my lawyer's head, the judge's head, but the cross-examination guy, the defense's lawyer, I think that's what he's called. But anyways, I saw him crack a smile at what I had said, and I'm like, ha ha ha. And what was interesting is I was doing a stand-up show a couple months after that for the Canadian Mental Health Association, just like as a fundraiser piece. Book Jeff Gobeil for all your fundraisers. And turns out the defense's lawyer was in the audience and he approached me. He's like, and he didn't even say hi, hello, it's Mike. He just went straight to it. He's like, "I should have known you were a stand-up comedian." And I'm looking at him like I don't recognize him because Mike shows up to court, with his tie and his damn coat. But no, he was at that stand-up show in like a hoodie with his daughter. And he's like, "I should have known you were a stand-up comedian. I've never seen someone so funny on the stand." And I was like, "I wasn't even being funny, man. Like I could have been funnier, I could have sold it." Um, and I found that to be quite a compliment. So part of the play, part of the work I wrote, one of the through themes is humor, healing through humor. I once heard during my time in university that humor shouldn't be looked at, or humor is healing. However, in a clinical lens, it shouldn't be the go-to because it is very dismissive and avoidant and all these bad things. And I'm like, you're not looking at this through an Indigenous lens. Through an Indigenous lens, humor sometimes is the only way. So I completely disagree with that. So part of the play not only is I mean the whole thing's through an Indigenous lens, but um, humor is definitely one of the themes. Identity is another theme. Um, Partly being robbed of it as a young kid. through abuse, but also through schooling and other means. But reclaiming that identity piece. Something I joke about a lot is that I grew up very native here in Winnipeg, and by growing up native in Winnipeg, I mean in poverty. And I didn't feel Indigenous, nor did I identify as an Indigenous until I was like 27, 28 years old, like a year after my father passed, kind of thing. Only allowing myself to have that identity after I started giving back, after I learned what it meant, the impact, and when I was ready to carry that. Do I identify as an Indigenous guy? So that's major in the play. If anything, it's probably the core theme is the identity piece, and then also fighting back. Um, Everyone talks. I mean, everyone in a world that I grew up in, everyone talked about like, oh, pedophiles should be killed, and you never hurt children, you never murder, you never steal. All these like commandments of life and rules of living on this earth that any man of any creed could agree by and abide by. And then you got these pedophiles walking around all the damn time. Um, it's so interesting what's going on with that our court stuff has lined up with everything going on with the Epstein files and kind of in a post-Me Too world. Um, I was telling someone I hope in like 10 years from now we look back at this pocket of time pre-World War III as like the condemning of pedophiles. Like, I don't know, something like that. Um, but yeah, the other theme of fighting back and reclaiming identity as well as humor. That's kind of the core themes of the play of the Crown Witness is a stand-up comedian. Um, I personally find it hilarious. Unfortunately, these aren't jokes that I can take to the world of stand-up and practice and hone because it is quite a heavy subject. One interesting thing that came out of the Canon Festival um, was I had requested a second trigger warning. Right off the top, they explained some of the themes you'll be seeing today involve child sexual abuse, involve sexuality, involve suicide, because they're just covering for everyone, every performance. So I think there was like 10. And then I specifically asked them like, before my performance, can you remind them? Can you do a second trigger warning and be very specific, child sexual abuse? And they did just that right before my performance. Philip and Chantel, I believe her name is. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But they both came out and they both said, all right, before this performance, we do have to warn people this contains child sexual abuse. Leave now. And if you become triggered, feel free to get up from your seat and sneak out. There's people in the lobby that can help you if you become activated. And people didn't listen. I think it is ironic and a very hilarious way how desensitized we've become to trigger warnings. Because yeah, apparently there was quite a number of people. And to me, this piece that I'm doing tomorrow is on the light side of things. As the acts get deeper into the play, it gets a little more heavier and um, in my mind, more potentially triggering. But like I said, people didn't take it seriously. I don't know that that's an accomplishment because I don't want to like purposely do it, but also, yeah, be warned. Don't come into this lightly. One of the difficulties I had in writing this piece, writing Crown Witness is also a stand-up comedian, was actually just getting it all out. I found myself only able to do one sequence at a time, and I had to walk away, regardless if it was a stand-up sequence or if it was a drama piece. Knowing not only what to say, but I very much got stuck in the world of my abuse. Before I was diagnosed with PTSD, I was having flashbacks. Um, and that's something I discovered through therapy and through sharing my stories and whatnot. And I found myself having them again for the first time since like 2021 while writing this. I don't go into detail where I'm explaining like the layout of the room or the time of the year, or I don't even give ages in this play. But when I'm writing it, I I have those images in my head. So that was difficult. On the one hand, to have to make sure I'm being gentle with myself, but on the other hand, to know that other people are receiving this information for the first time as an audience member, and how do I make sure they're taken care of at the same time? So finding that balance was really tricky. In certain instances, I feel like I held back a little too much, and that's what me and Corey are still trying to flesh out. And in other instances, I got Corey being like, "Dude, no, that's not a punchline moment. That's a pin drop moment." I would cut the rest of the conversation off at this point. Do you realize this is the first time the audience learns the guy's name? Do you realize this is the first time your age is revealed? Like da 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 da. I think I had a lot of difficulty with that. As well as collaborating. I am the world's worst collaborator. If we're talking art, it's mine and stay away. And to work with Corey as well as my wife, um, because my wife is very much my mirror, my person. I bounce ideas off and let she gets every draft. For her to walk over and be like, that sentence doesn't make sense, and I'm looking at her like, you don't make sense. Just joking though. Writing it, the process of writing the entire thing was very difficult. And then what jokes do I include and what jokes are relevant and what's too much and what's too little was tricky. Um, One of the other pieces that I struggled with were my dreams of abuse came back. One of the reasons I had to go in therapy in the first place was I started becoming fearful of sleep. Um, I remember probably at the peak of my alcoholism in like 2018, um, I found myself drinking 2 king cans of like Labatt Dry, which is like a very high alcohol percentage, and a 6 pack of Miller Lite, just so I can sleep without dreaming. Um, but what was very nice about this was not only had I gone through court, I have every support in the place imaginable, and because me and my sister's court case was on the news. Everyone is familiar with my story without me having to explain it over and over again. So to tell people that I'm struggling in this moment, I don't want to be alone in this moment. If anyone wants to hang out or go like get a bite somewhere just so I can not be in my own head, was very helpful. The dreams came back, but they weren't as strong as they once were, nor were they as scary as they once were. I say dreams now. I used to say nightmares or night terrors. They were just dreams. I'm happy that I've worked through enough of my abuse that I can say that. And the other piece of writing this play and sharing my story and being on the news and stuff like that, and I think probably the biggest takeaway for myself that I will never forget for the rest of my life is the disclosures. Ever since coming forward with my story and the Facebook statuses and being on the news and performing in the Keanan Festival. And I'm sure it'll happen tomorrow after my performance, but I'm at 13 people who have come forward and told me you and your sister disclosing in the way that you did and refusing to have the name block, whatever they call that. Um, so important, so powerful, and it's already doing um, amazing work for a lot of people, not only to inspire, but for those who never came forward and will never come forward to sit with and know that there are people are out there that are not only can do it, have done it. And I know there was some important law that changed. I just can't remember what it was enough to explain it. But like I said, the big piece will be the disclosures. 13 different people, starting actually the very first person to approach me was an elder. He said, I'm welcome to share his name. I choose not to. Had approached me and been like, hey man, same thing, 4 different people myself. And I was like, goddamn, dude. And right down to someone recognized me at a Safeway, was like, hey, you're Jeff Gobeil. I saw you on the news, and shook my hand. It was, I'm really happy I ran into you. I'm a victim too. And I was like, damn, dude, you're person 13 to disclose. But with that being said, I'm just about wrapped up here. I did want to talk about 3 of the I'll call them turning points of the writing process for the Crown Witness is also a stand-up comedian. I think the name was a huge piece. Um, my inability to write anything without including stand-up in it, I think kind of saved the whole thing because I had already put in the money for the Fringe Fest. I had already submitted it to Keanu and I was ready to throw the whole thing away and walk away. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not doing this stupid play. I'm a comedian and nothing else. Um, Thank God I didn't, because yeah, like I said, now the show is half stand up, and when I say stand up, it's not 50% of it is going to be joke wall to wall jokes. It's stand up in its purest form in microphone with storytelling, with setups and punchlines, but also with sharing of oneself. I think a lot of people don't recognize that the unfunny parts of stand up, where a comedian is going on for 5 minutes without a single punchline, is equally and as valid a part of stand-up as the rest of it is. So the play is going to be half that. Also choosing not to make the whole damn play one big trauma porn. I think it's kind of disgusting when people want to hear your story, but they want to hear details like you were how old and he did what, and it's like shut up. Um, I have a note to talk about choice. I can't remember what that means, but I had a note about choice. Um, yeah, I think I've kind of shared everything I can for myself. And it'll be tomorrow at the gas station theaters. I believe the doors are open at 7. Or doors
Hi,
open at 6:30, show at 7.
you got it. Doors open at 6:30.
Hey, there
Yeah.
we go. Doors open at 6:30 tomorrow at the gas station theater. The show starts at 7. My performance specifically is just after intermission, so hope to see some of you there.